Hello, everyone, and welcome to this month's Python Exchange. My name is Cameron Riddell, and today we have a very special event as we are joined by my friend and occasional open source collaborator, Will Dean, who's going to share with us a little bit about from code to PyPI, streamlining your Python package release with GitHub, which I am absolutely thrilled to hear about because I have never actually released my own Python package, so I'm very interested in this topic. Will is a statistician and data scientist with experience in geospatial and user analytics. He's passionate about Bayesian methods, which is that thing that I swear I've been trying to learn for almost a decade now, but I never seem to dedicate enough time to. And he uses data visualization to tell a story and designs software that makes solving data problems easier and more enjoyable. In fact, Will has nearly convinced me to switch my Vim workflow over to NeoVim many different times. This passion has led Will to become a creator and maintainer of several Python packages for Bayesian statistics and data scientists, from his own library frame search to community projects like PyMC-Marketing. Now, we will have a fantastic discussion today about packaging, and to help further our discussion, we are joined today by our team of host panelists. And to get to know our host panelists better, I always love asking our host panelists to share with us the types of questions they feel best equipped to address from our audience today, because I'm curious, what do you consider yourself an expert in? So let's start with our host panelists. We'll start with James Powell. James, what is it that you consider yourself an expert in? What is it, or the type of questions that you want to help us answer today?
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us in today's session. My name is James Powell. There's been one thing that's been weighing on my mind for the past couple of weeks, which is, when do we really need to use tools like Rust, Zig, or C++ in our work? And when is it the case when using those tools really doesn't get us any further than if we had used Python and just written the slow parts in Rust, Zig, or C++? And so if that's a question that you have today, I'd love to answer it for you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, James. You'll also notice that we are joined by Eugene as well. So Eugene, what is it that you consider yourself an expert in? What types of questions do you want us to help us address today?
Okay, hello everyone. I think I'd rather leave this question about the expertise to someone else who can judge me. Regarding what I want to learn today is, so I have done some work on Bayesian statistics specifically for chemometric analysis during my postdoc years, but that's been quite some long time ago. And during that time, we're also thinking about making our work its own package. So I think this talk today really nicely kind of wraps my interests up, and I would be very, very grateful to learn something new.
Excellent. Well, Eugene, thank you so much for being able to join us today. We really appreciate it. Last but certainly not least on our team of host panelists, we are also joined by Tom Caswell. Tom, what is it that you consider yourself an expert in? What types of questions do you want to help us answer?
I'm Tom Caswell. I'm the current project lead of Matplotlib and a core developer for H5Py, so I have a lot of experience distributing compiled packages to users, and I'm happy to take questions about which of the many distribution topic channels that are available for a package are the best for any given use case, including system packages, conda/pixie, or wheels.
Awesome. And I'm very glad that you said conda/pixie, because Tom, I've been absolutely or hopelessly addicted to using Pixie in almost all of my projects recently.
I don't work for Pixie, but you should use them.
Love the plug. All right. Thanks, Tom, for being able to join us today. Now, of course, we are also joined by our guest panelist, and that is Will. So Will, the same question to you before we kick off. What is it that you consider yourself an expert in, and what are the types of questions you'd love to hear from our audience today?
So I spend a lot of my time working on Bayesian models. I work with PyMC Labs, mainly in using the software PyMC. And what really catches my interest as of late is really getting these models into some deployment situations. So being able to store these off and being able to have a tracking lifestyle. But because there's a lot of software around it, I spend a lot of time also in just getting stuff into into other people's hands and making it easier for people to use it, whether it be yourself or the team that you're on.
Fantastic, Will. Well, I'm super appreciative that you are here today. And with that, that wraps up our introduction. So, Will, I'm actually going to go ahead and turn the spotlight over onto you. You're the person of the hour. So, Will, why don't you take us away with your discussion on From Code to PyPI?
Cool. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Great. So, yeah, so you got a little bit introduction about myself, and what I want to focus on today is just some of these workflows that I've been using over the last few years, and I've been iterating to make some of my life easier when I'm doing package maintenance. And the real idea here is that I want to focus on things I like to do, and then other things that I don't want to do, I want to be able to try to automate as much as possible. So I cover a handful of things in this topic, in this talk. However, I want to cater to a few different populations, and I hope that there's something here for many people. So I want to talk a little bit about how this Python packaging and getting this to PyPI actually is done. Just briefly with respect to the automations and these GitHub Actions that I'm using. And then I also just want to demystify some of my maintenance that I'm doing, and highlight that, there's a lot of times there is this need for automation. It can simplify a lot of things. So in my agenda, I just want to talk a little bit about GitHub Actions, and really what this workflow from starting with GitHub issues to creating PRs and then doing a release will look like. And I'm going to showcase some of these pre-commit hooks that I like to use for automations. And then, yeah, I just want to give a few tips here and talk about some things that I've found useful. So my motivation here is that I think, like many others, you make something cool, you want to share it, whether it be with work or on some task you're working on. You make something in Python, and you either want to use it in the future or you want to share it with someone. And then as that matures, there actually are a handful of maintenance things that I think are inevitable. And I want to focus on this coding aspect of things, this making new features, fixing bugs that I want to work on, and not on this overhead. So I'm going to talk about this package that I have recently been working on called Frame Search as this motivating example, and have this repo as just something that I wanted to share with others and use. So just a little bit about this package is that it's a GitHub search-like functionality for data frames powered by the Neurals package, which is a very cool library. And it's very simple. It's just you import the package like this. You don't actually have to use it directly, so I'm having this no quality assurance. And then based off of any data frame library you have, then you have this search method. And this is where you have this search-like ability. So GitHub search has a bit of a unique syntax, but it's basically just a string, and you reference keys and values, and you can have a lot of this Boolean logic. And the reason why I was excited about this is I found it really useful in Marimo notebooks. So you can, maybe for people that are not familiar, there's this new type of notebook called Marimo, which has this ability to have these very interactive aspects. So I can showcase this here in this documentation I have. This is the extent of what this repo, this frame search library is about, is just this search method, which gets added when you import it. And then there's this handful of this Boolean type of logic that you get access to. And this is available on this link right here, and I can send it on the show notes. And it's based off of the GitHub syntax, which I have linked some cheat sheets. But the cool thing here is that with this interactive notebook, I can filter this data frame above just using some type of string. So if I want to go down to just say people in New York, I can do that. But there's also some syntactic sugar that allows you to do some very English-like terminology based off of the data types. For instance, has passed should notice that this is a Boolean column, and then I can use some type of English-like search query. And then there's also some convenient mappings. For instance, is math major wouldn't work because math major with an underscore is not a column. However, you can provide some types of mapping here, but I can see that there's no math majors in New York. But if I go to the larger scope, I can see that Bob and David are math majors, which is great. I love math. But this is the extent of the package, and I thought it was cool. I was doing a lot of work in Marima notebooks, and I wanted to make this available for me and for anyone who's of interest. So there really is a question that I want to cover first of this maintenance challenge. I do want to address that there's some reasons why you should make a package, and then there's also some reasons maybe you don't want to make a package, and these are not exhaustive, but just want to cover them briefly. So I want to make something reusable for myself and others. This is one of my use cases here. And I also want to extend some of the functionality of, say, the data frame libraries. And then if you want to change some type of interface to the libraries that you like to use, I think that's a fairly good use case as well. But I think there's also elements of when you wouldn't want to make a package. For instance, a lot of stuff does already exist, so I like to just search around, see what's available, and try to be a open source contributor where I can, and maybe to get a contribution. And then I'll touch over this a bit, but there's this level of maintenance that's inevitable. For instance, versions change, and whether it's something you're going to have to address this month or next year, there's always things that you have to that come up and you'll have to kind of address. A lot of these are related to versioning. For instance, every year there's a Python change, or maybe there's a major, minor, or a major update, which your dependencies are affected by, but it might be dependent upon your use case. So, but what I've been kind of working towards is my no-brainer workflow. So I just want to focus on jotting down ideas, making sure that they're reflected in GitHub, and then focus a bit more on that coding stuff that I enjoy. And then not have to think much about how these artifacts get pushed up and get shared. And I think I've found something that I've really ported between a lot of the projects that I've been working on. And then the great thing here is that you get these automated release notes. So you get a bunch of CI/CD testing, and then you can, of course, get that project available to others via PyPI. So here's a diagram that I've tried to reflect my workflow. Here on this left side is where you'd have like GitHub issues. Here's in the middle is this development cycle. And then on the right is publishing. And I've labeled some of these nodes with yellow and blue. Yellow being something I would be manually doing, and then blue would be this automated. And as I was mentioning, the ones that are left as yellow are these things that I'm, hopefully I can spend more time doing, and then the other stuff are necessary, but if it's possible, then I can automate it. For example, doing formatting and linting is something that I would like to automate, just so that pardon me, just that when I can do iteration on pull requests, I want to be able to not have to have that as recommendation of, oh, this is the indentation, or this is the formatting recommendation. And also I want to have some sense of security when I'm doing some assurance when I'm publishing my updates, that my my code is working. So that's why test suites are important. But in this development cycle, I'm going to cover aspects that go into pre-commit, which is I'm putting as the more of the local automations, and then GitHub Actions, which are these remote automations. But you can see that GitHub Actions also shows up in some different aspects because it really has a lot of powerful triggers that are available that you can leverage when you know the tool. And yeah, I just want to note that the ones that I've left manual are really just coming up with some ideas on how I want to change my code, doing the development, making a PR, doing code review. Granted, there are AI tools that do kind of some of these now, so you can maybe do a half coloring of manual and automate it, and then just kicking off the release. The great thing with a lot of these are actually they're quite simple. For instance, creating a pull request is very easy to do. I like to use the GitHub CLI, and it's just a GitHub PR create. Same thing with merge, similar command, similar with release. So you really spend a lot of time just working on the ideas that you're trying to iterate on. And a little bit of background here. So pre-commit, as I mentioned, has been on that local side. And it just runs before you do a commit. All those would be defined in the pre-commit YAML. And if you're looking to try to automate some of these things, there's a lot of good stuff on precommit.com. And then they also have a way to, they have the references on how to search it on GitHub too. So how you can even find this stuff for more general projects. And then GitHub Actions are these remote, which are remote workflows, which are going to be triggered by various different events that GitHub defines. Many of which are going to be these pushes and these PR creations, but you can get very creative and do stuff when issues are changed or when there's a release. And they're all defined in this slide that I will get to you guys. And then these are all just defined in this workflow file. So in total, you just have these YAML files that you're working with that you're able to do these automations. And then I've been delineating that if I want to have something locally done, I want to keep it snappy. I want to do things just like linting, formatting, maybe type checking if that's if it's a large package though, I might push that up to the remote actions instead. And then maybe some documentation checking, like making sure that this module is documented or anything that you can do fairly quickly, but then also just referencing your code. And then all of their tasks are then put onto GitHub Actions, where long-running tasks like tasks would be there. Things like things that would interact with other type of environments, like pushing to PyPI or using other services would be leveraged there. But you can get quite clever here. I do a handful of automations that happen when issues get edited to make sure, say, the title of the issue is in some type of form, or adding some labels so that the release notes are appropriately happening. And yeah, I want to go down into just a few now deep dives. So as promised, the publishing to PyPI. I really think it's gotten so much simpler in the last few years, and these next two slides are the extent of what you got to do if you have something if you're using UV for your package manager. So I'm not going to talk much about using Conda or pushing Conda forwards, but it'd be great to. I know that equivalent actions like this exist, and there's equivalent workflows. So I encourage you to find the one that would be equivalent. But I'm sure to say that the all these equivalents would just be a file like this. It's just going to be this YAML that's existing in the workflows file. just call it publish to have an appropriate name. And then every action will have some type of name and then a trigger. So I'm seeing that when I push with the tag of this type of pattern, then I'm going to sequentially then do the following jobs. So there's some information about the runner that's being used. It's just the machine that's in the cloud, right? And then it has some permissions that are set. And then subsequently are the tasks that are being run then. You can utilize these other GitHub Actions that you could find on the marketplace. This checks out your code. This sets up UV, which I need to use to publish my package. And then the following two are just commands that you'd run in the command line if you were doing it yourself. So this run is just going to use this setup and environment and just build and then publish, which is quite easy. And you know that there's no tokens here, and this is what I think what has become a lot easier over the years is because you can register your action on PyPI. So in order to publish to PyPI, you need to have an account there. So that's something you'd have to set up. But once you have this this account, you can just go to your publishing settings and register this action. So in my case, I have this workflow in publish. I have my repository under my owner, and then also my repository name. And with this works, and it's really quite simple. And all this is now relying on is this trigger to happen. And I want to talk a little bit about next the automated release notes workflow that I enjoy. So I'm using the same type of coloring as I did before, the yellow or the manual, and then the blue or this automated. And these were some of the nodes that were in this larger diagram, and I'm just highlighting them here. And the workflow here worked towards generating release notes, which I'll show you right quickly, but there's really just the idea generation of this creating of issues and then touching a button or doing a command line command of release create in order to carry this. So this automated release notes is really cool in my mind because you can get this slick looking interface on your GitHub that's going to publish and also show up in other people's feeds that characterizes all the features, all these recent changes you've had. So all of this here is generated from previous pull requests. So if I didn't have a previous release, then every change up until the release you're making would be indicated here. And if you have appropriate labels, then on your PRs, then you can categorize them like this. So what I'm doing is that anything that has a certain label is going to become a new feature. Anything that has a documentation like label is going to go into the docs. And then anything that's maintenance level would be the kind of the catch-all. And as I was mentioning here, I like to label the issues that I'm creating. So for instance, I'm saying, oh, this is a documentation issue. When I'm looking on my documentation, I just create an issue when I can. I label it docs, and that's the last I have to think about that label. And then I know that it's going to show up in this documentation thing down the line. And that's all leveraged by using the PRs to close out these issues. And just to make it to compare right here, so these different sections are just defined in a YAML file as well. And this is exploiting the GitHub automated release notes generation, which is a really cool feature. This is just a file, a YAML file that's in the GitHub folder as well. It's on the root instead of the workflows. And here's just doing these categories. So if a closing PR has a enhancement, then it's going to be a new feature. If it's a bug, then it's going to go into bug fixes and so forth, which is a great little way just to come along with your publishing of your package. The great thing here, this shows up not only on that repo of yours, but then also if someone stars your repo, then this will show up in their feed on GitHub, so you can keep people up to date. And I think it's a nice little looking thing. And of course, you can edit this if you want to highlight something else, then go ahead and show a code snippet or something like that. And then part of this, the reason why this labeling the PR is automated is because of this workflow that I've used. I came up with it because I really enjoyed just being able to label the issue, and then I had noticed that a lot of the times when I was closing these issues, I actually didn't even add the label to the PR. So without that, then the automated release notes just will put into this catch-all, which is all maintenance and doesn't reflect what you're actually doing. So this is the YAML that would be needed for this. And what's happening here is the trigger is on this PR target. And then the steps that I'm going to use is this repo that I have called closing labels. And you just have to provide it with the GitHub token because it interacts with various GitHub elements like the issues and the PRs. And we have to give it the appropriate permission in order to modify the PR itself. So here, this isn't even working with my code directly, so I don't have to do that checkout step. I'm just interacting with the issue and the PR and just making sure that those labels are up to date and are coordinated. This allows me to not even think about the PR labels. I can just work on the PR. I can just know closing this issue, closing this bug, and then everything will trickle down into the release notes, which is cool. And then I'm going to go into a little bit of the pre-commit hooks. So pre-commit, like I was mentioning, is something that I just like to use for these snappy checks that I can do locally. And then the one that I use a lot is for Python development. I'm using rough, and just easy to just do rough check, rough format, which are in these IDs here. You can just go to the repo specifically and learn a little bit more about their options, but this is just existing in this pre-commit YAML in the root of in your repository. And with this, you can make your own with pre-commit. I like to use pre-commit for checking. Maybe there's another like a test file for this module in my Python package, making sure that things are all in sync. You can check this quite quickly, and it's just nice assurance to make sure that you have this quality standard with your package. You can get really clever with things. So this is, of course, not what everyone should do for everything, but for me, a bare minimum for my project is I'm having formatted code, and so this is where I like to do it. And then another requirement I have when I'm making packages, I need to understand whether my changes are going to have some impacts that are unforeseen. So I always like to make a test suite, and this is the GitHub action that I would define in order to run this test suite. So here, just naming it tests, and using a trigger of push and on a pull request, but then also limiting it to when there's only changes to the repository. So this allows me to the repository code. So this allows me to say make documentation changes and not have to potentially wait 10, 20 minutes, depending on how beefy your test suite is. And then in the jobs section of this, I'm able to spin up a few different runners in parallel, trying to look at my Python versions that I'm supporting, and then running my test suite. So here, once you set up the machine, all you have to do is a run, and then just have the command that you are you would be running locally, but in this environment itself. So in summary, with just a few YAML files, you can come up with a robust workflow. You can make sure that you have quality code being pushed to a repo with both pre-commit and the checks there, as well as ensuring that you have quality code with your test suite being run remotely and testing on various different versions. And this is the extent of what you'd have to add to your package in order to just get these adjustments going. And yeah, some key takeaways I'd like to note is that when you're bringing into some automations into your project, just start with the biggest pain points you have. As I was mentioning, linting is crucial because if someone has a PR that's up and it's there's a single quote versus a double quote, you don't want to have to think about that type of stuff. You don't want to have to think about spacing. You just want to make sure that you're looking at the logic directly. So come in with the things that you think will just make the biggest impact. And then my next thing was say automations really pay off. So I've been developing this and I've been plugging and playing with various automations over the last few years and a handful of projects that I'm working on. And yeah, if you like it, then you just bring it over to the next project. If you don't, then you ditch it. If it's not relevant for this one, but it is for that other one, then you keep it in. And I would maybe just want to mention that if you do go down the route of contributing somewhere else, just be respectful of the other maintainers, and they are really giving their own time for a lot of these projects. So it's great to just respect that and see where you can be respectful there. And then just learn about these tools. You can really automate a lot of your stuff. Just understand where complexity is, and then just let tools work with them. And then also the tools that I've picked up, I've really found from a lot of the projects that I have worked on or have just noted in these open source packages that I use. For instance, the New Orleans library had some cat emojis at one point and thought that was cool. So I, had looked into where is that happening. And as I was talking, it's either going to be happening in the GitHub folders or it's going to be maybe in and at least tracks down, can track down and say, oh, maybe I'll add that to my own project. But yeah, you can learn a lot from other projects if you're interested in something. Then if you note something, then just go ahead and see what maybe where that is happening. Wow.
Yeah, that was amazing, Will. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the insight and a lot of the tools that you have built. Let's go ahead and open things up for Q&A. So if you're in the audience, you have any questions, feel free to use either the chat or the Q&A widget. We'll monitor both. And while our audience is coming up with some questions, I'll also open things up for our host panelists, Tom, James, Eugene. If you have any questions, feel free to kick things off.
So one of the workflows that went by set off an alarm bell for me because it used pull request target, which is an action target that is very useful when you need it, but has been used to hijack a couple of Git projects. Can you say something about how you manage the security of these actions?
That I have heard about that, and I don't have I think that might be something I need to change then. I know that I do limit the permissions on the runner itself. So but it might be a generous permission then. So do you have any recommendations? Would it just be if I just want to edit labels of between issues?
So for labels, you do need that because you need So pull request versus pull request target controls whose secrets the job gets access to, and pull request target is your repo. Pull request is the pull requester's repo. So in general, if some random person with the internet comes up and opens a pull request, they don't get access to any of your secrets. They get access to their secrets.
Exactly.
So I think just make sure you're doing the escaping correctly. And I would recommend when you specify the version of the action to use, specify the full SHA, because this avoids the second thing that a number of these attacks have been. You find an unpinned version, attack the action, replace the tag, someone else's action runs, and now you've injected code into the more interesting repository with accelerated permissions and done something fun like publish Bitcoin miners to PyPI.
That's a very good tip. Yeah, the use of the SHA is something that we've done in some of the downstream libraries. We've used I think it's Zmore or Zig
Zizmore, yeah.
Zizmore, yeah. Yeah, so maybe that could be linked. That is one of the catches that you do get with that. So
I apologize for the comment masquerading as a question.
oh, good. No. I appreciate it. Yeah, I know. In order to do that, make that action work, you need to have that. But I would love to have some feedback. So that is just my GitHub repo. So feel free to add an issue if you think there's something that could be risky there.
I mean, just set the SHA as the best.
Great.
Awesome. And then James, I see you have your hand up as well.
I have a question about the decomposability of this automation, and I'll give a little bit of context. I've been on a multi-weekend attempt to try to renovate or reinvent the way that I write my shell scripts in order to solve a problem that I run into with any automation that I write. Beyond just the limitations of the tools themselves, it's that they break. They break when I need them most and when I have the least time to fix them. And I look at all of these steps that I've composed together, and I cannot figure out how to break it down into the parts to just get the thing to work. And especially when this is interacting with a third-party service like GitHub and GitHub Actions, I enter this horrible iteration loop where I make a little change, I update everything, push it to my repo, and then I wait 10 minutes for it to come back and tell me, oh, no, this other piece was broken. How do we make sure for these automations that they are decomposable and they can actually support a tight iteration loop when inevitably some little tiny detail breaks and you really just are pressed for time to get it running again?
So in terms of the automations that I've used, a lot of the time the test suites are the biggest bottleneck. And in the projects that I work on, for instance, PyMC-Marketing, we're doing marketing solutions, and our test suite is, I think at one point it was like 30 minutes, and then I use tools like PyTest Split to break it down. That though, I mean, I'm just stating the reality that some of these other smaller things like maintenance of labels and making sure things are formatted all right is something that's not going to be a large bottleneck. I did actually notice recently, so when I was preparing this, the GitHub CLI, which I utilized for my action, broke. There was a backwards compatible change, and of course everything kind of fell apart. Yeah, I guess this is a side of there's a maintenance reality. So as mentioned, versions change and you're working with things that you don't necessarily control. I try to break down things into, I think the benefit of working on various different projects is you can see maybe where different projects would benefit from the same type of thing. So you can see, oh, this is a quite small unit of work. This is a quite general piece of logic. And that's where, I mean, I work on some Bayesian stuff. I work on some plugins for stuff and other hobby projects. And I've just found that these are some workflows, but hope that answer your question, James, I can iterate on it if you'd like.
I think the idea of a test suite, maybe that's what's anathema to me. I hate writing tests, so maybe that's a problem that I have. But it's about identifying quickly which part of the automation broke because, especially with some of these third-party services, they change their APIs, they don't really tell you, or they emailed you 10 times and expected you to read any of their emails, and then you're just stuck trying to fix it.
Yeah, one of the I mean, I'm coming from doing a lot of Python code. I think one of the automations that my team has benefited from is that when we run our test suites, and of course you don't monitor these logs all the time, I've used some actions that will then inject that into another GitHub issue that just is standing there, like for instance, warnings. It captures all the warnings, and then you can use this. I'm sure there's some other third-party solutions that do this, but it's just an easy way to see where the warnings are, so you can not have to go deep into logs, but see like this pinned issue. And then hopefully that catches like deprecation warnings. And when we do this major, this major update or a major update of our dependencies, then we can hopefully catch that. But unfortunately, we're in a reality that software does change, and it's in a breaking way, and stuff that's written last year unfortunately doesn't always work next year and this year. But
Pesky
yeah, I just
maintainers.
what you said.
I said those pesky upstream maintainers.
Exactly. But I tend to find that I look at GitHub a lot and GitHub issues, some of these surface objects in GitHub as opposed to deep in the logs. And I expect that my colleagues won't be doing these deep diggings all the time. So if it's able to make these more visible, then that's when I try to at least empower the team by doing stuff like that. And that may be, if I don't have a production Slack instance, but pushing the logs to Slack or some type of account is, maybe an extension of this.
Yeah, James, I think it's a really good question because I've also wrestled, so to speak, with GitHub Actions. And oftentimes it's because there's some, maybe a whole script embedded inside of an action. And you're thinking, all I want to do is run this locally and not have to push up and then wait for something to come back or to then peer inside the logs afterwards. And so possibly a way to keep everything as superficial as possible is to keep that, if there's a whole script embedded in action, keep that script as a local file and then just have the action run that script whenever it needs to be run. Is that kind of a workflow that you have adopted there, Will?
And Kim, I even heard the advice, just to step in, that people say to minimize how much of the GitHub Actions API you actually use and to just keep almost everything you can in a shell script so that you're not reliant on little quirks of features that GitHub Actions provides.
Yeah, I think being as superficial as possible there is beneficial at the very least. There are going to be some things, like a lot of things that Will showed today. I don't think you need the GitHub Actions for, right? Because it needs the permissions or it's making some type of stateful change on it. But for things like tests, right, I should be able to set up, honestly, most, if not any of the test environments locally and then just be able to run those locally. But of course, we also want those things to trigger on pull requests and run on pull requests as well.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, in the projects that I've worked on, you get people that you don't exactly know what they're doing locally. You don't exactly know what their environment is. Maybe they submitted a pull request via voice using a LLM tool. I'm not sure. So I think there's always that need for that remote check. When I'm developing, if I'm doing something, of course I'm running the test, but then there's a 20-minute wait on my particular machine or my setup, or it's in some JSON type of module, then it's sometimes hard to catch it. But yeah, I mean, just tricks that I've been learning. I'm sure it's going to change over time. I really appreciate this conversation here. It's a lot of things to think about.
Yeah. as a follow-up, Will, I'm curious, you mentioned early on like AI code review tools, and I'm curious, have you ever used any of them? Because I'm more on kind of like the conservative fence there. I don't believe it until I've actually seen some good out of it. But I'm curious, what's your experience with them? Are they worth all of the hype that people tend to make them out to be?
I've been using I've been toying around with using this workflow where so the one I was mentioning where I just basically create issues and then I do the PRs and that development loop. I mean, GitHub at the moment provides their agents there. You can assign the copilot quite easily to an issue and then it will do something. Of course, it gets you into a territory where you just have to review more code, which I mean, if anyone likes to do that all day, that's okay. But I think, I'm just saying that, a lot of the fun stuff is writing the code. But but then you can do that, assign the GitHub the Copilot agent to the review as well. I'm also on that conservative side, especially when you have these these large changes that are come in. And then for me, I just try to make it as easy in my workflow to look at my code and make issues based off of references in the code and make sure that it's um, uh, make sure that it's enough information for someone to start and label it appropriately. Um, because I'm from some of the packages I'm working on, I'm not sure if it's going to be me taking it or it's going to be someone I know or someone who's trying to work it out or potentially some type of AI agent. Um, but I've only toyed around with it briefly. I think it's interesting if it could um, speed up this backlog that I have on a lot of these projects that I have, a lot of these ideas that I, have when I'm walking down the street on something I've been working on just here and there. Then in my mind it's cool. I just want a tool that, helps me rather than hurts me.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Kind of in that similar vein, there's a pretty popular blog post a couple of months ago by Daniel Stenberg called "Death by a Thousand Slops." If you've read that, I see Tom nodding. But effectively, it's a blog post that describes kind of the damage that AI can do when it's over applied, because now you're forcing code review that's just hallucinations of things like that. People still need to look through it. But I think for the workflow that you've described here, the types of ways that you've been using it or you're thinking about using it, you wouldn't be subject to this. But I just thought it was interesting, kind of, if you take it to the extreme, it can be very, very damaging, especially when we realize that human time is finite and absolutely nobody wants to merge in AI generated code that is not reviewed.
Totally. Yeah, I don't my extent of using it has been some of these GitHub agents and then of course local type of tools like Gemini or something like that. And I know like the context side of things is quite crucial and I would assume that the well-defined issues so it doesn't, completely just dump everything um or throw everything away. But in my mind, these remote tests and these remote checks, these actions are gonna be my safeguard. So try to put a lot of trust in those, which could be, a false safety net sometimes. But thanks for sending the article.
I have a
Yeah.
controversial perspective on this if you'd like to hear.
Sure.
Cam is a big fan of coffee, and he may tell you all the importance of grinding your own beans or, really paying attention to what you drink. No matter what he says, people are still going to go to Dunkin' Donuts and drink that slop. Personally, I think no matter what we believe as experts about the quality, the usefulness of AI, people are still going to use it no matter what. If we say that this is a useless tool that accomplishes nothing for anybody and brings great harm to the quality of the work that we do, it simply does not matter. People are still going to use it. And so we should focus our attention on how to mitigate the harms or how to try to get people to move in the right direction, because there's nothing that we're going to say that's going to change anybody's mind about whether or not they want to use these tools to be lazier.
Yeah, I agree with that. Um, but I don't know where these actions, like using GitHub Actions and automations, fit into this. For instance, if a project is so rigid, then no one wants to contribute to it. You know, if you have to sign every commit and you don't do that usually, then it's just a hurdle you have to jump. You're trying to, or you know, you have this workflow. I use some of the local LLM tools that, you know, they never make a branch and they put it right to main. And it's just like, well, I don't. Do I have to be explicit about this every time? Seems quite obvious, but you know, not when you. But yeah, yeah, it'd be interesting to hear what other people are doing in that regard. But at the moment, a lot of contributors are, I think, human beings, but we'll have to
And
adopt.
yeah, I was going to say, and hopefully it stays that way, right? At least as of right now, based on my opinion right now. I am also curious to bring us back to a little bit of the building and publishing workflow stuff. Tom, you mentioned earlier about Conda and Pixie, and Will, I know you said that you weren't, you haven't used those kind of styles, but in so far as automation is concerned, right, there's probably a GitHub action for that. But I'm curious, Tom, how different is kind of the build and publishing process for Conda and Pixie when compared to PyPI?
Great question.
Dangerous question you've asked me, Cameron. So I think the Conda Forge environment or packaging ecosystem is much similar to more traditional packaging environments like Linux package managers, Brew, Mac ports, where the packaging and building of the binaries is decoupled from the people who develop the projects. The wheel ecosystem very much is a self-serve. If you're going to release a project, you are responsible for building all of the binaries and like pushing them up to PyPI yourself. So in the case of like Matplotlib and H5Py, we build something like 30 plus wheels to cover the matrix of operating system Python version, architecture, libc flavor, like that. And this matrix gets bigger every time. Unfortunately, there is a project called CI Build Wheel, which uses GitHub Actions to either find the right runners and or emulate for that set, but it still is a pretty big lift if you have C extensions or Fortran or whatever extensions you need. In Conda Forge or any of the Linuxes or anything like that, the sdis push to PyPI is treated as the input to their publishing process. And so when we do a release of a project, the sdis goes on PyPI. Conda Forge has a watcher that is notified when that happens. And then they have a bot that automatically opens a pull request to their feedstock that updates the recipe to use the new sdist instead of the old one. That goes through its own PR process where they try to build their binary artifact, and if that passes, it's merged, it's rebuilt a second time, and then those build artifacts end up on the channel and become available. There are a lot of benefits to this. The first, well, I guess I'll name two. The first is that this additional step, which can seem like a downside because now there's two steps instead of one, but this bit of friction actually helps prevent the some of those attacks I mentioned before, where if someone got credentialed to a, there's an attack where someone got a GitHub, basically a personal access token, pushed malicious code to a GitHub repository, and because they were fully automated their release process, were able to from that bootstrap themselves to publishing wheels to PyPI, and now there were, I think it was either miners or like things that try to steal crypto tokens or crypto keys, something like that was what they published. The extra friction of Conda Forge, if you've not turned on auto merge, at least means there's like one more place a human can notice and say, did we mean to do a release here? Was this intended? So like sometimes that friction can be good, particularly on high impact libraries, which may be a particular problem I have that not everyone does. And second, although CI build wheel makes this a lot better, when you build things with extensions, you're implicitly pulling in things about the ABI of the underlying libraries that you're pulling from your system. And it's very easy to build a wheel that works on your machine, and when it's run on someone else's machine, either just doesn't work or seg faults or does all sorts of terrible, confusing things at the below the Python layer. What CondaForge or any of the Linux package managers do, or packaging systems do, is that they have a coherent set of the non-Python dependencies that when you build against that set, and they have enough metadata to make sure you're only installed with that set. So like in the case of H5Py, when CondaForge says, right, we're going to update our libHGF5 build, they do that. And then every one of the, I think like half dozen packages that depend on libHGF5 are then subsequently rebuilt and a new version of them is added to the channel. And so if you want to use H5Py and PyTables together, if you're pulling them from wheels, 90% of the time it works, 10% of the time it fails in obscure ways. That is better than it used to be. It used to be 50-50 depending on the import order and who would rebuilt more recently. But when CondaForge, that never happens because both binary artifacts are linked against the same libHGF5, which is the one Conda/Pixie made sure was installed. So it's just a more complete system. Sorry, that was not a short answer.
It wasn't a simple question, right? The entire process of packaging is very, very complex. But Tom, you actually made that sound very coherent and digestible. So I appreciate your insight on that. This ends up bringing us to the end of the time that we have for today. I want to thank our audience for your participation and for being here. And of course, a big thank you to our host panelists, James, Eugene, and Tom, for helping us find and drive a very insightful discussion. And of course, Will, for all of the tools and all of the automation, not only that you've shared here today, but that you have built for other people so that you can make their lives easier. And of course, Will, thank you so much for your time for joining us. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule. I want to invite everyone to tune back in, not next month, but the very beginning of December. We will have our next Python Exchange, where we will be joined by Vincent Warmerdam. So do keep an eye out. You can always check in on our website. That's meetup.doepy.org. Thank you all for joining us, and I hope to see you at the next Exchange. Have a great one.
Thank you. Bye.